Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagan. Welcome back for another fun-filled, action-packed episode of Iowa's most interesting conservative podcast. I am here in studio with everyone's favorite John Hendrickson, and Sarah Curry decided to grace us with her presence today, so we are here. We are assembled and ready to entertain. It's fun already, isn't it, John?
It is, yeah.
Good. All right. So I'm going to kick things off today with an announcement. And this is, we are announcing the annual Iowans for Tax Relief in partnership with NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Business, is our annual Tax Day and Small Business Luncheon. And that will be on Wednesday, February 22nd. Doors open at 11:30 and beginning at noon, and will be wrap up about 1 o'clock. It will be at the Des Moines Heritage Center in the East Village. So last year we had a really nice turnout in the middle of an ice storm, and looks at this point, the weather's been really good lately, so we think everyone can easily make it to the event. But if you want information, that's all on taxrelief.org. Hopefully everyone that listens to this podcast gets the ITR Watchdog and the ITR Foundation newsletter. But it's a really good event. This year we're going to have Senate Majority Leader Jack Whitver and House Ways and Means Chairman Bobby Kaufman there. So I think it's going to be interesting, relevant. There's a lot of pieces in play at the Capitol this year that we've talked a lot about. And so if you, the main, okay, I should back up. The really key thing here is free lunch. So if you want free lunch,
I mean, that's why I'm going.
Come to Tax Day.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, we'd love to have you. It is, like I said, it's a great event.
Did I see the menu first?
Yes, John. You'll get to approve it. I'll make sure of that. Good. Well, I asked the two of you before we came on the air here if you are comfortable rendering an opinion on the end of or at least the end of first of the nation status for the Iowa Democrat Caucus, and you both just kind of stared at me. So here we are, and I'm going to ask you to say something meaningful, but it is a significant point in history. For 50 years, Iowa has been first in the nation, and been a lot of, John, we've talked a lot about presidential politics and history, and a lot of it goes through Iowa. And Sarah, you've been in different think tanks and organizations around the country, and at least in my experience, it's hard to go anywhere around the national circuit and not find people that have done a tour of duty in Iowa at some point. So maybe not on the Democrat side in our circles, but it's a big deal. And the end of it is a big change. So I'm actually kind of sad and disappointed about it.
When my husband and I were moving out here, people were saying, why do you want to live in Iowa? It's like, I get to caucus. Are you kidding? Like, how exciting is that? And everybody knew what I was talking about. They might have thought I was a political nerd, but and now that's gone. And I remember as a kid learning about politics and watching the Bill Clinton Comeback Kid movie.
Yeah. How
he lost in Iowa and then came back in New Hampshire. And I just feel like that's this iconic, political movie like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington kind of thing. And now it's different. And so maybe I'm old school, but I just like things to stay the way they should be. And now it's not.
I would agree with that. And of course, Sarah and I are both non-Iowans, but
you're supposed to have hot takes on Iowa. So,
but,
okay, good.
When I first moved to Iowa, it was a caucus year, and it was, and I had, watched them from a distance, but actually participating in a caucus, and we talked about during the last podcast, or maybe the previous one, about the importance of civic participation and within local governments. But the caucus is a very unique experience, and of course, Republicans are going to keep doing theirs, which is good. But the other thing is that one thing that I found so unique about Iowa, whether you're Republican or Democrat, is that literally you can be in Bob's Coffee House and be sitting right across from a potential president.
Yeah.
And my first year, I remember being at all these events, meeting various candidates, and just being able to ask them questions. And so that is a very unique and special thing. And Iowa, I think, gets a bad rap from the nation because they say, well, we're not diverse enough. I don't think that's true. The other thing is that I think what the Democrats did as a whole, and I'm going to make a political statement here, is I think it's a slap in the face to rural voters because, bringing the Democrats especially, they keep losing among rural voters, and this is not going to help them because they're not paying attention to rural issues and rural concerns. And, Iowa obviously has urban areas, but we're also primarily a rural state that has concerns about rural America. And I think this will hurt the Democrats. There's a great civic tradition in Iowa, being first in the nation with being able to meet your candidates, shake their hands. And that's much different than going to a rally with 100 or 1,000 other people and getting a stump speech that you don't really feel part of.
I don't want to render too deep in an opinion on how Democrat politics works because I frankly don't know. I do know this, that our nation's first black president does not get elected but for the Iowa Caucuses.
Good point,
yeah. And Barack Obama came to Iowa and held events in people's living rooms and coffee shops and talked to Iowans, the Iowa Democrat voters, and they chose him over Hillary Clinton in 2008, and he becomes president. So it seems to me that's a pretty good retort to that. There have been 4 Democrat presidents in my lifetime. 2 of them only became president because they came to Iowa. It's Jimmy Carter and Barack Obama, and I just dated myself a little bit, but that's fine. But really, I think John's point's what I always, as a defender of the caucuses on the Republican or the Democrat side, you have to come here and it has to be retail politics and you got to be good at it. And Iowans, whatever you think of them around the country, are really good at interviewing and doing their diligence on these candidates. It might not come up with the nominees or the winners that the national media or the powers that be would like, but they take it very seriously.
And it allows candidates who do not have, a massive financial war chest a chance to do something. Mike Huckabee as an example, when he served in. I remember my first caucus. I actually caucused for former Congressman Duncan Hunter. I was one of 2 people, I think, but I thought Hunter was right on the trade issue, and that's why I supported him. But he it was Iowa gave him a chance to make his case, and again, it's regardless, it's a great way to meet these candidates and force these candidates to really connect with people.
There's a fantastic long form article in the Des Moines Register just about the history of the Democrat caucuses, what went wrong in 2020. And I think it's a really good piece of journalism. And to anyone who may be a subscriber to the Des Moines Register, I imagine it's paywalled, but I don't know. But check it out because it really is really well done. And there's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of old stories. Everyone that's been around the caucuses while has a favorite caucus story. Mine has nothing to do with any of that. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard me tell the story of my father-in-law pulling the Yang Gang out of the mud in rural Poweshiek County. So it was great. He told the story in his own way, and whatever Apple Maps, Google Maps took him down a dirt road in the winter in Iowa, and they were on day 2 of trying to pull their rented PT Cruiser out of the mud until my father-in-law came along, and they tried to sign him up, but he was pretty diehard Trump, and that didn't go very well. But I found their tweets on it. So like weeks later, I find this string of tweets of these guys from New York that had come into Iowa and how they couldn't get out of the mud until this local farmer finally rolled in and saved the day. And I tweeted at them that, that was actually my father-in-law. So anyway, it was a good story. Okay. Fun stuff aside. Sorry, Sarah.
We're talking about local civic engagement. That's a good pivot into local government, right?
Well, maybe that is the transition point, because the caucus is really about local engagement, and the actual event is about sitting down with your friends and neighbors. And it really is. It's a neighborhood kind of a function. But we've been trying at Iowans for Tax Relief and the foundation with our ITR local project to try and boost civic engagement, because folks are frustrated with their property tax burden, things that are happening at the local level. But by and large, folks don't show up. They don't go to a city council meeting, and they don't turn out to vote in municipal elections the same way. And so maybe it's time for the state legislature to engage on their behalf, but we'll see. Anyway, in our last episode, we talked a lot about Senate Ways and Means Chairman Dan Dawson had a couple of big tax bills, one on income tax, one on property tax. And I think we talked quite a bit about the income tax proposal, but you did some work on the property tax piece, and Senator Dawson actually included part of something that you've spent quite a bit of time on, is all of the different property tax levies that exist in Iowa, some that folks don't even know are there. So talk a little bit about what's in that bill, some of what you've done in your research, and bring us some hard information rather than me just blathering on the microphone.
Well, first I like to look at other states and see how Iowa's different. And so when we talk about property taxes, our cities can levy a property tax of $8.10 per $1,000 of valuation, right? So I'm thinking that's it. We'll start digging into this. There are over 30 different levies that the cities can use for different purposes. And that's crazy to me, because when you look at all these other states, they have their levy and that's what they have to live within. Like they levy this property tax and that's how they fund bridges or convention centers or libraries or whatever. And that's all within their budget. And Iowa's totally different. So what Dan Dawson's bill is aiming to do is to get rid of a lot of these levies and consolidate them down to where they are just in that general levy. And no, they're not getting rid of all of them, but I think it's a really good first start. That way people can actually understand what their cities are spending money on.
Well, I think that's the flip side of one of the barriers to people getting involved more is the system is really complicated. There's a lot of factors. And last time you were on the podcast, we talked through what is rollback? How does the valuation work? How do these, in trying to shine some light on how this works. But this, even if not a direct property tax savings, and it may be, digging into the details, but it certainly would make property taxes easier to understand. I thought it was really interesting just how much some of these levies are even utilized.
Oh, yeah. There's a number of these. There's no city in the entire state even using it.
Give some example of ones that are very heavily utilized and ones that aren't utilized as much.
Okay, so one that's used a lot is our police and fire, like retirement and paying for that. Paying for just the general fund, using that kind of stuff. But then there's other ones like building a bridge over the Missouri or the Mississippi River.
Yeah, special levy for that.
There's a special levy for that, and it's $1.35, but nobody's using it. And that's because that was created over 100 years ago when Iowa was growing and we needed bridges over those major rivers. There's 3 or 4 levies in here focused specifically on bridges.
Do we need the bridge that goes to Illinois or just the one that comes from Illinois? Sorry. Anyway.
There's some other ones on here, like the iconic Iowa band tax.
Yeah. Got to have the band tax.
Well, if this bill passes, we won't. And that's okay with me, because I think if that's a purpose of your city, it should be hooked into their general fund levy. We don't need a separate levy, not only for instrumental and vocal music groups, but another one for the symphony orchestra. They each have their own levy there.
Oh.
And then you have a levy for operating a civic center. And there's different ones, whether your city owns it or if they rent it.
But so they have all these oddball levies, but very few communities actually take advantage of them, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
I've got the number here, and there's some on here that only one city in the entire state uses it. Here, only 97 cities use it. Now that might sound like a lot, but we have almost 1,000 cities. So we're talking less than 10% there.
Good. In my mind, limiting taxing authority is part of what we're trying to get done here on property taxes. If they're necessary functions of, now, usually when you tell local government they have to spend less, that immediately means that they're going to cut police and fire. But maybe it's stopping the municipal band. Maybe there are other options available to them, but that's my editorial comment aside. But so that bill takes a stab at eliminating quite a few of those levies, correct?
Yeah, it really gets rid of the ones that nobody's using anymore, and it focuses on the levies that if some are using it, they're not using it very much. Like here's one for cultural and scientific facilities. We have 3 cities using that. That's one of the ones he proposed getting rid of because only 3 out of 900 and something cities are using it. It's okay.
And I'm gonna put you on the spot now on another one. So there's a in the House there's another tax proposal, and that has some components in it that you really like as well. And I don't know if you brought in this chart, but some of the bonding changes to bonding rules that cities can do. There's several different components of that, but we had talked about this, all of us, that restricting or putting better guardrails on local government's ability and capacity to bond. I think that's a really good component in the House bill too. So I
think you bring up a good point. A lot of people are saying if you look at the Senate's bills and then you look at the House bill for property tax, they are miles apart from each other.
They are very different.
But when it comes to debt and bonds, they're not.
Okay, good.
When we look at House File 1, Section 3, it's about direct notification and having better reporting of bonds when they're issued and how that affects the taxpayer. When you look at Senator Dan Dawson's bill, he also includes a provision in there of requiring all types of debt to be reported on the annual financial statements. And people might be wondering, well, why is that such a big deal? Well, when you look at the property tax levies for debt service, it's uncapped. The limit is as needed to service the debt. So the more debt they keep issuing, the higher the property tax levy for that goes. It's not in the general fund. It's in this special debt service levy. So I think reporting on debt, sharing that information with taxpayers, and just having there be more information out there is extremely important. And that's one area I see the Senate and the House agreeing on.
I agree. I think there's a lot of room for them to come together on some really good language on bonding. I'm sure we'll hear about how our community is going to build new aquatic centers, but maybe we'll just have to take that when it comes. John, I know you're a big fan of community aquatic centers. Are you going to be able to get by if local government can't build a new lazy river?
It'll be hard.
Okay.
It'll be hard. Summers are hot in Iowa.
They are.
Well, and I want to make another shameless plug, I guess, for myself here. Do you know there is no entity in the state of Iowa that collects local bond data? So, like, we have an election coming up. We have no idea how many bonds are being voted on. Except now we do, because I just did a records request to all 99 auditors. So that will be coming out soon.
And that's important because we've advocated as an organization in the past for only having bond elections in November when there's more participation. People are attuned to what's going on and used to going to the polls. But in March, most folks are still catching their breath over the last election. And yet here's this, maybe cold and snowy March day or whatever, and they don't even know what's happening. And the turnout rates for these, it's really hard to get the data on what the turnout is, but they are very low.
I mean, very low. We talk about the caucuses. Iowa historically is a very, very engaged electorate. We vote a lot and have high turnouts. But in these March elections, we're talking 4%, 6%. I mean, sometimes on a good, exciting mayor election, we might get 10 or 12% voter turnout. To me, that's not enough voting on tens of millions of dollars worth of bonds.
That impact every single residential, everyone, every business, they pay property taxes one way or the other. It impacts them.
Exactly. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have debt. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that if you're going to have debt, the citizens on the hook for that debt should have a say and know about it.
It's one thing, you hear folks that don't vote like, well, it doesn't make any difference anyway. And maybe to some extent that's true in some of our elections, but this matters. These local bond referendums matter because it will directly impact your bottom line, and you get to directly say whether you want it to occur or not. And it's another thing that we're going to try and do at ITR Local is, as we boost civic engagement, is get them more information, like you said, about what's coming up in their community. So that's coming out soon, right?
Yeah, it took me 2 weeks to hear back from all the auditors. Now I got to compile it all and put it into a form that people actually want to read. But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, John, you've been quiet. I know how much you love this local government business, but John just votes no. He doesn't need any information. He knows it's just no. No, he didn't need any of that nonsense. So, I missed the chance. We were gonna talk about McGovern and Muskie and all that, and the caucuses, and maybe you'd have had something to say about that, but
that would have been exciting.
But we are, alas, out of time. So anyway, John and Sarah, thanks for joining. Sarah, good to have you on the podcast again. And don't forget to share, like, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your neighbor, tell your neighbor's cat, whoever needs to hear. John.
Yes.
Would you like to say hi to someone?
Yes, I want to say hello to a listener, one of our key listeners, Alfred. So hello, Alfred.
Alfred's a good boy, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he's actually a plot hound.
Is he a plot hound?
The official.
A fun fact. What state?
Yeah, of your home state of North Carolina.
That's right. That is the official dog of North Carolina.
Alfred is my parents' plot hound that they adopted from Iowa. And every time they listen to the podcast, he hears my voice and runs to the window. So,
that's really fantastic.
Sweet.
Well, Mr. and Mrs. Hendrickson were listeners, I think, 10 and 11 on the podcast. Maybe it was 11 and 12. So, Alfred, we've got to be into the teens now, I would think. Yeah. So, okay, great. Good. We need more Iowans, but Alfred, I appreciate you tuning in. So, anyway, boy, I think that's about all I got today, guys. So, anyway, share, like, and subscribe and tell your friends. And with that, we will see you next time on ITR Live.